it's impossible for us to know exactly how another person feels. However, you can still try and be understanding. There's a lot of focus on gender and not really caring about gender. There's a lot more of openness about who they are, and they couldn't come out. And then when they came out, they wanted to fight and they were very aggressive. And one kid wanted to fight me, and I was like, no, you need to back down.
Welcome to MAMWAA. I'm Gordy, your host, and this is the podcast that includes you into my most famous song lyrics.
He's a middle-aged man with an attitude, and he didn't even have one till he met you.
That's right, I'm the middle-aged man, and my attitude will chatter us through all things that I'm passionate about, from spirituality, the gym and fitness, food, travelling, and music or movies. Quick disclaimer, this list is not exhaustive. So you can get on or you can get off and join us for the episodes that you like the sounds of. Dip in or dip out, as long as you keep dipping. Either way, we've got something to say and we're going in 3, 2... One thing that many of us struggle with in this life is staying true to ourselves whilst making a difference in other people's lives. And in this episode, we're talking about making meaningful work that matters, as well as helping the less fortunate too. Our guest today is a queer, Indigenous poet, a playwright, visual and performance artist, an essayist, an educator, and the founder of the IE Hope Collective. Welcome to the show, Gina Duran. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here.
No problem at all. So how are you doing, firstly?
Well, I've been busy cooking this morning, so my son's coming over to visit, so I make everything from scratch. So
That's
so it's been fun.
Food, like you can't
Yes,
beat it.
healthy foods.
Yeah.
Trying to get away from the American diet.
Oh, that's quite difficult. I love a bit of fast food as well. It's the sugar levels I can't take. So yeah, basically for our listeners, Gina and I hooked up online about the show. So let's just start, Gina. Tell us a bit about your background. What's your history? I know you studied in LA, but is that where you're actually from, or is that where you're coming from today?
I'm from the Inland Empire, and I currently live in the Inland Empire. But if you want to know, like, further back, I grew up in Fontana, which is like 2 hours away from Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where's Inland Empire? Where's that?
Inland Empire is right next to Los Angeles County. Yeah. So it's a Riverside and San Bernardino County combined, and that's the Inland Empire.
Got it. Okay.
And nobody knows what that is anyway. So.
I don't know if I've ever heard of it either.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Palm Springs?
I've heard of Palm Springs in movies, yes.
Yes. So we are in between Palm Springs and Los Angeles. And if you've ever heard of Rancho Cucamonga from I think it was the first Friday, or maybe it was the second
I've
Friday.
Seen it,
was
so I would have heard of it.
Maybe the wrong actor. Anyway, so yeah, if you've heard Rancho Cucamonga, that's where Rancho Cucamonga is. That's in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino County. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I'd love to visit LA and California. I've never been. And some of our listeners probably have never been as well, some of them. So what's California like? What's your favorite? What's your to-dos and not to-dos?
So California is diverse in its land and its people. So you have, I love it here because you have the desert, right? Palm Springs. And then you just drive a few, like probably 4 miles away from Palm Springs to the west, and you're at the beach. And in between that, you have the valley and the mountains. And the mountains are more north of where I'm currently at. And then San Diego is more south from where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. And so, if you've ever heard of San Diego, a lot of times that's where SeaWorld is. I'm not big on the capturing of the whales, but that's where SeaWorld is.
Okay, bro.
Also San Diego Zoo.
I'll tell you something though, my geography is absolutely terrible. And I used to confuse Las Vegas with Los Angeles. Probably just because of the initials, L, starting with L.
Yeah.
But when it comes to America, it doesn't work.
You get lost.
Me. Yeah.
That's okay. When I'm in England, I get lost too. I don't know where I'm at.
We're only about that size in comparison, but
It's true, but you can get lost anywhere. That's all my
geography
point
is
is.
terrible. Now, I was seeing on your biography that you're Indigenous. Now, I know for me, like for a long time, I used to hear the word Indigenous, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's the Australian people." But I know now it doesn't mean that, and a lot of our listeners might be thinking the same thing. They hear the word in movies or television, but they don't
Yeah.
really get what Indigenous is. So, just to deviate a bit, like, what is Indigenous? Like, tell us about that.
So, in other words, there are a lot of Indigenous people within the United States that were considered native, all right, are Native Americans, right? So those people would be like, well, I'm MAMWAA, all right? So MAMWAA is, I'm also Laseno and Inuit. And the Inuit people are what the ones that live in the snow and very ice type area. They're
Okay.
also found in Canada and Alaska, not too much in Alaska. And Nawa are also indigenous to a lot of Mexico, and they're commonly Aztec and Mayan people. And so some of them migrated this way due to colonialism from the Spaniards. And then you have the Gabrielino and I'm trying to think of who else is in this area. But I know Gabrielino right now because there's currently a whole situation with a tree that's probably the third oldest living thing on Earth, and people are trying to build warehouses around it, which will essentially kill the tree. And it is the oldest oak in the world that is still surviving. And so there's and I had a guest on my radio show, but the Gabrielino are supposed to have received the land in order to help protect the tree. But there's a whole thing about the tree that's also happening that might prevent them from actually being able to be recognized by the country because of some warehouses.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues that happen around that. And I'm trying to think of who else. There's the Shoshone are native and indigenous to more areas within Idaho, and then you have Blackfoot people who are more east, which are, I guess, I'm not going to say exactly where. I know a lot of people in Oklahoma, I think, ended up being Blackfoot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that is where they're from. Some people that were Native American were actually pushed into certain states to live on tribal grounds and they were forced to live there and or live in poverty a lot of times. So a lot of the people who are indigenous to this area are still not federally recognized, even though millions of people were murdered. I'm just going to say it like it be due to genocide, due to colonialism. Yeah. So that's when I say I'm indigenous. I'm talking about all those people.
So am I right in like it's historical native tribes of a specific area?
Or bands.
Okay.
Bands. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So like when you think of the people who are from Australia, you're thinking of the indigenous people who originally lived in that area, and due to genocide, were wiped out, or barely any of the people still exist, or maybe are now being respected and honored. We are still dealing with a lot of issues due to colonialism.
Yeah,
and it might get worse now. So, yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's kind of a sad topic, and some people don't often avoid it. But it's part of our American history, right?
Definitely, yeah. I've seen a lot of things online this week, and all it was said was, "It's a sad day." It's a sad day. So, a carrying on with the Indigeny, you do Indigenous poetry as well, don't you? Before we get into
I
like the performance side, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I am a performer, and I do have a lot in my poetry about my indigeneity, as well as my Chicanx or Latinx, or that you would be called me a Latina or Latino, and I don't like to gender it, so I put an X there.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so the same for the Chicanx, is like means I'm Mexican American, but I am a rebellious one, so Chicana or Chicanx. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So like I do have a lot about identity inside of my work.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I do in my art too, which if I think you did look at some of my stuff on my website, which I was covered in mud, and some people think that's a statue. No, it was me. I covered myself in clay that I dug up from the earth.
Yeah.
And I put black tape over my areolas and my mouth, and I was wearing hand painted rainbow boxers, and I had my arms tied behind my back,
I
and
saw
I
that.
freed
Yeah.
myself after like 3 hours. I purposefully stood there with rocks in my feet in the mud, for like 3.5 hours, before. I think I was only an hour in front of the audience, but I'm trying to remember how long I actually stood there. It was like 3 hours. But if you count all the time of prep, it was probably about 5 hours
Yeah. That's
of me
mental.
standing in the mud like that. Yeah.
Bonkers. What we do for performance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun though. I mean, like people, and I had the wind swirling, and I recorded the sounds of the wind in Fontana, California, and then I went in Claremont, California, and then I got sounds of blizzards, and I because I'm also a DJ, right? A radio host. I overlapped them on a little DJ mix, and I made them sound kind of like a hurricane. Yeah, it was fun. And so
Brilliant.
people came in and they're like, "Whoa, what is this? This is intense."
Yeah. So I mean, we'll get into the collective soon. But in regards to your poetry and arts performances, then, like, talk to us about the how long you've been doing it. How did it come about from your like writing work and your essay based work? Like, what came first?
Okay, so I don't know. Okay, like so when I was a little girl, I started painting at the age of 4.
That's a good place to
I'm not
start.
kidding. But that really is when I started
Yeah.
painting, at
Okay.
the age of 4, and I won my first art contest by the time I was 10, and it was published, and it was for the American Humane Society, and for animals, and then I got into performance art, and my first acting gig was at Fontana City Mummers, and I was 13. Yeah, I was 13 years old. So I've always been just like everywhere. I dream of doing this, and so I do it. It's
Yeah.
like I want to be a writer, so I started writing, and I think the first officially published piece that I had, I was 18, and I was writing for the school paper, but I published this with the city paper. So if you go further back, then I guess I don't know how old I was, probably like 15 or 16 when I first published my writing in journalism.
Yeah. And you had some writing in an awards ceremony, didn't you? What was like? Was it you had a poem published as part of an awards ceremony?
I don't know, as part of an award ceremony. I've done a lot of different ceremonies. I get asked on a regular basis to read
Yeah.
or to perform in front of people. Don't really consider my readings as readings. I consider them performances,
Yeah.
because it's basically spoken word poetry.
Mhm.
And even when it's academically written, I still perform it. So I consider all my work spoken word. And that's because I'm performing, and it's more of a show. And I feel like I would really love to do recordings of my book, and I have a second book that I'm working on right now. at Antioch University, and I'm graduating in like 2 weeks. So,
Congratulations. That's an early
thanks.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
great.
I don't really know what ceremony though, because I know there was one in the Antelope Valley. It was in Victorville, and maybe that's the one you're talking about, perhaps? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and check, but yeah, I was reading
Yeah.
some of your poetry had kind of been submitted as part of an award. Um, so let's get into like your poetry and arts performances, and you're
Mhm.
quite big on leading positive change.
Mhm.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I can see a lot of that in what you do as well, um, and you do a lot of work in the community to drive that positive change. So
Mhm.
let's start by just tell me what you think is missing in your community to start driving that positive change.
Well, I feel like as a child who's born, like I said, Chicanx or Latinx or Indigenous, I never really felt like I fit
Hmm.
in my community. And people would say like, "Oh, you're really smart for," like, "'cause
Yeah.
I'm not white," and so because I got so much of that and I felt like an outsider growing up. I grew up in a very rural area of Fontana, California, and so I loved the horses and the chickens and the pigs. It was awesome. But as far as the way I was treated as a person, it was different. It was othered. And so I felt like I really wanted to have more community. And also, I think I was raised very early on with a lot of Christianity, a lot of Catholicism, and so instead of getting the negative stuff out of it, I actually pulled a lot of the positive. Like and I'm not of any religion now. I just consider myself spiritual, but I do see I did see a lot of what was positive to me about how Jesus would help others, and to me that was the most important part of the
Hmm.
Bible, was that to help others is to be a community. And to me that's what I got out of it, was that love was the most important thing, and unity. And so that's the reason why I have so many collectives, because I'm focusing on us as a collective, and including the radio show is called The Collective. That's my radio show. So and it's just focused on us coming together as a community, and creating positive change. And that's all I ever wanted in this world, and I'm probably going to be joining the Peace Corps after I graduate. So
Wow.
that's my dream. I mean, like since I was very young, I was like, I'm going to do this. So I want to be like this. So
Yeah, I think generally as a people, we do want to be better, and well, I'd like to hope a majority of us want to be better,
I hope
um,
so too.
and whether that's to benefit other people or like develop ourselves in some way.
Hmm.
What, in your opinion, then would you say we need to start that process?
So where I started in my IE Hope Collective, it's the Inland Empire Hope Collective, is that we need to learn more empathy. And so that is where I started, was empathy.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people have a confusion on what empathy is. It's really sympathy, to be honest. It's like a more developed version of sympathy. It doesn't mean that you know exactly how another human being feels. You can't. That's impossible. It's impossible that I know how you feel. We don't live the same lives.
Yeah.
And even if we did, twins, just as an example, can't. They too are still, even when they are simultaneously experiencing the same thing at the same time and have the same DNA, it does not mean that they are perceiving that same situation, because there are still different things that happen to them in their lives. So it's impossible for us to know exactly how another person feels. However, you can still try and be understanding. and exhibit sympathy. And I feel like we don't have a lot of, especially in the US, I see that there isn't enough sympathy in the world. And so the first thing that I wanted to teach my community was empathy. And the second was introspection, because I realized that in order to be more empathetic, you have to be more introspective. So it's like, how do you realize that you're not being empathetic? Just as an example, like you have to realize, oh, I need to change this thing in order for me to have more empathy or sympathy for
Yeah.
another individual. Yeah, to extend yourself in a kinder way. And that doesn't necessarily mean like you have to change yourself either. You know, there are times that you do need to change, but there are also times that you need to change your situation, like where you're at. For an example, if you're in an unhealthy relationship, the change might be that you need to leave that relationship. It doesn't mean that you need to exhibit so much sympathy that you're willing to be, hurt.
Yeah.
So like that's really important too. And I feel like there's just so many ways of looking at that it's important to understand that this is where introspection comes in. And so the next thing that I focus on is community building.
Yeah.
So if you're more empathetic and you're more introspective, then you're going to want to start to build up community. You're going to start to realize, hey, I can't do this by myself. Like I get like why am I so hyper independent? In the United States, we want like this have this hyper independence where we're just so good on being our own and not worrying about love. I mean,
Yeah.
hello, we're human beings. We need love. That's very important. So, community is very important. And love is not just about romantic love, it's about spiritual love and it's about familial love and it's all of your friends in your community. So,
Yeah. I
that's it.
see I like to think of some of that as like a relatability. Like we can never always know what somebody's going through or been through, but if we can
Mhm.
relate, even just minimalistic relatability, we can gauge a part that we can maybe support. Like we can say, "Oh, I may not understand what you're going through, but I can relate slightly. So this is where I think I can help you, just even just a little bit." In that independence, like I get that, and I think it comes from, for me, being, I'm going to use the, I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it, oppressed as a child, because
Yeah.
I could not be myself. And what follows on from that, from my perspective, is I need to shield myself at all times and depend on no one. And that's
Yeah.
just that's not I'm not a sympathy thing, because it develops from there, from childhood. You go through the following years being like
Mhm.
hyper independent and
Mhm.
shielding yourself from absolutely everyone, and it gets to
Yeah.
a point where it's like, hold on, I need to check my ego. I need people.
Yeah.
Need people. You just,
Exactly.
yeah. And unfortunately,
Exactly.
some people like myself, we learn that too late. Not too late. We learn it later on, um,
Right.
and you maybe missed a few years of connecting.
That's why
It's
I try to work with kids that are in foster youth and juvenile hall and refugees and homeless LGBTQ youth, because all of these kids have to understand hyper independence. It's a survival skill.
yeah,
It's like, especially if you're in foster youth, right? Or you're a homeless child who's trying to survive on their own. That's all you know
hmm,
is how to survive on your own. And so now this way of protecting yourself. It's not like they don't want to be loved. They probably want to be loved more than anyone else, right? And that's the whole point. Like,
yeah.
and it's not just them who's learning the empathy.
But then
I too
also,
am learning the empathy.
then like at a young age, you end up having this constant fear of rejection from backgrounds like that. Um,
Mhm.
and it continuously develops until you're a bit more mature and you say, why am I like this? Like, what can I do about this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, like, I didn't grow up homeless. I didn't grow up in a healthy home either, though. But at the same time, like, I also learned this very independent way of behaving. And I didn't understand why I couldn't be closer to people, why I wasn't able to make more relationships and have these more loving friendships, why I always felt so outside. And it's because I was being othered or oppressed or suppressed, right? So, I did not feel close to people because of that. And it was a way of me keeping myself safe and not realizing that. So as I realized that about myself, I just started to think, what are ways that, because I see it everywhere, what are ways to change this? If I too am suffering from this, how many more people are suffering from this? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I started to see myself and other people. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, right? Because a lot of times when we first initially go out to help others, we're trying to heal ourselves. And the point is to learn how to heal yourself first before you can go out and start helping to heal
Yeah.
others. But you can still help others heal in like just by being present and with consistency. And that's one of the main things that I learned while working in juvenile hall, just as an example, is that I couldn't heal any of those people, right? I can't. I don't know their experience, just for starters. I don't know what it's like to have to be in a cage all day long and not to be able to come out. When they got in trouble, they were in there one time for an entire week and they couldn't come out. And then when they came out, they wanted to fight and they were very aggressive. And one kid wanted to fight me. And I was like, no, you need to back down.
Not having that.
Yeah, right. And I was also working with what students that were considered to have been there for attempted murder. So when they wanted to fight, I took that seriously, but at the same time, I didn't run away from them. I stayed. I stayed and I waited. I mean, I could have left because technically that's a threat, but I'm not going. I knew that the student wasn't going to cause me harm, and so I waited until he calmed down, and I just continued to show up for them every single day. And one of the times there was a substitute teacher who didn't want to allow them to have music. And I was when I got hired, that was part of the program, is that they were supposed to have music because they're learning with the music, spoken word and rap. Okay, like how are you going to rap without the music? So they were learning performance and visual arts too. And that was for the students who weren't necessarily going to tell their stories verbally. So, I ended up putting a zine together for them, and that's what the whole thing was for. But in order to get them to perform, I used music. So they had music every single day, and it was a way of warming up and a way of them communicating with me and sharing with me. And eventually I went from having 2 to 3 participants to all 15 participating. So I had 100% participation for the last few weeks, and I became, close with them, like, as close as one can get, you know, um, as a student and a teacher. In other words, I'm just communicating and sharing our feelings and talking about things. Next thing you know, because the zine was about their dreams, and they didn't want to tell me about their dreams. Their dreams were all centered around money. But by the time I was done talking to them, some of the students who refused to let me publish or take photos of their poetry, now, because I fought for their right to have music inside of the class, and they actually witnessed it because a substitute teacher tried to prevent it from me. And so then they're like, oh, I got you now, miss, I got you. Because I was like, dude, what do you think I was trying to do this whole time? Like, literally, this is the only reason why you have music in the class, is because I was here. So but they understood now. And so, like, they were like, oh, she didn't just back down either. It's like she fought for us.
Yeah.
Right. So then I earned their respect that way, and I didn't run away from them, and I just kept showing up, and that is what was important. And so then I had 100% participation, and they started sharing stories and telling me their dreams, and they enjoyed hearing the quotes from powerful Black women and things like that. Like, Audre Lorde, right? Like this is important.
Yeah. Like I've seen in the past, because I've worked with young people for years, that when some people come in and they start this power struggle, and they're trying to
Yeah,
keep control instead of working with young people who need to express. And I guess working with young people who need an outlet. They're not just young people who
hmm,
want to do performance. These are young people who
right.
need an outlet, and that creativity gives them a chance to express what they're holding in. And it
Yes.
becomes much more than just like an extracurricular. It becomes so much more than just
Yeah.
extracurricular. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, sorry, I just went off there.
It's
But
art. It's art therapy. Yeah.
literally, yeah.
Hmm.
But as an educator, then, how would you break down the biggest issues if we start with the young people and then the issues we've got in society? How would you break that down so that we can be more alert towards it?
Well, I think like one of the things that we're doing is, like I said, one of the reasons why I'm teaching empathy is because they're not the only ones who are learning the empathy.
Hmm.
I am too. Like I'm consistently learning and I have to be flexible when I'm teaching. So when I give a spoken word assignment and nobody wants to do it, and I say, how about rap? And then they start rapping. When rap actually is poetry
Yeah,
and it is spoken. So it is spoken word.
yeah,
So rap is poetry. So is song. Music is. And so all I'm doing is I'm reaching them in the way that they are more open to me too. And I also have alternative assignments. So, I mean, I'm not going to force anyone to participate either. That's the other thing.
yeah,
It's like people think, oh, they all have to make something. No, they don't. Sometimes just you being there and them listening to you is enough. And you may not feel that it's enough. And I'm not even going to say that I actually understood this when I first started because when I first started, I had a student who was from a foster youth type of a group. She had just lost her mother, not lost her, but her mother had left. And so she was in a very angry place. And she didn't, and here I am, a woman in front of her, right? And she doesn't want some mother figure, but she also wanted to be there at the same time, but she didn't want to participate. And I kept trying to get her to participate, and she told me I was trying too hard. And I mean, I was like, how am I trying too hard? I'm trying to figure out like how I'm trying too hard. How I was trying too hard was by trying to get her to participate. Like, how is it that I can, what can I do to get her to participate?
hmm,
I kept trying to give her more or different assignments. But really what it is I just needed to allow her to just sit there and be there, to be present. So, I too have made my mistakes, but I'm also learning from them at the same time. And that's the really important thing is like when there are certain types of therapies and behavioral intervention and things like that over here in the United States where they force students instead of maybe the teacher's the one who needs some rehabilitation, right? Like maybe you're the one as an educator who needs to say, okay, I need to make the adjustments. I need to use positive reinforcement
hmm,
and give them things to stimulate themselves with, like with touch, like, using clay and things like that, where they don't actually have to do the assignment, but they're still learning. And there are other ways without having to force your students to learn something in the way that society needs them to behave and do things.
yeah.
That's, I think, is like one of the most important things that you can know as an educator.
And I think teachers can sometimes be part of the bigger problem. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure some of it has changed since I was in school, but
Hmm.
just an example, one of my guidance teachers, when I was ready to leave high school, we had a meeting to plan for the big world, and he says, "What do you want to do with your life? What do you want for a job?" And I was like, "My dream is to be a presenter." And he said, "Try again." He said, "No." choose something more realistic. Give me a real job. And I was like, you're supposed to guide me, not just shoot me down.
Right.
But yeah, it's just bonkers. It's adults can sometimes just get completely waylaid with
Well, you showed
helping.
them.
It's
You showed them, though.
bonkers.
You're still a
Yeah,
presenter.
literally. Yeah.
Literally, that's what you're doing. I don't know
But
if you have to have another job aside from being a presenter.
this is exactly it. It's like people's bubbles, isn't it? People are stuck in their own bubbles, and if they
Right.
don't have the bigger mindset, they can't lead young people properly. And I hate to say that because maybe their dream is to be a teacher, but they need to open their mind to help every single young person in the same way, I think.
Right.
Anyway.
But when I was a kid, I had a huge list, and everyone told me that there was no way I was going to be able to do all those things.
I had the same.
I did.
Yeah.
I have done all of them.
We should them. And talking of which, that brings us on to your collective.
Okay, so the I Hope Collective is my outreach that helps the homeless LGBTQ youth, foster youth, refugee youth, and special needs youth, that group.
Okay,
is that the one you're asking, or are you asking about the collective radio show?
No, this is the one I'm asking about, because I believe this is your poetry, art, and yoga self-care workshops.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's what I meant.
That is what I do. Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. Okay. So that was where I also do, as an educator, that's where I go out to like juvenile halls too, right? But through the I Hope Collective, I go to foster youth homes and mental health facilities, and I've been to refugee camps in Mexico, and I've also gone to some special needs programs, and like to just do things for free. And sometimes there have been times the organization has gotten paid though too, but I don't really profit at all. Like they just help. It helps with like the expenses of all the work I just did for them, like the things I had to buy. And I also will get volunteers, but I often will pay the volunteers because, as a person who's done a lot of volunteer work, I know that it's nice to get a little something once in a while.
Yeah.
So I will provide these workshops for youth where I'm teaching them pretty much the same thing as like what I was talking about with the students in juvenile hall, as an educator. And this is one of the reasons why I get paid for those. And I will teach yoga and mindfulness and breath work to help deal with anxiety and with anger. And some of the things that I focus on are our emotions. So it's not just empathy and introspection and community building. I do a lot of learning how to, with the introspection, I'm using the art to learn how to use the feelings that we're having inside of us to express them verbally, and as a performance, rather than taking it out on the people that we love. So you can get that energy out, and commonly the one that is most chosen is anger when I'm having them do a performance. So they will commonly do anger more than any other.
Yeah. So
sometimes they'll do happy, but that's just because they don't want to do the anger.
Yeah.
But so I also have them choose their own I do a big thing where I choose the emotions, and they get to tell me like rage or sadness or depression, like they choose the words for those things, and then they perform either gibberish words or they'll do acting lines that I have for them. Sometimes, rap words or song lyrics. That's another one that I've done, is song lyrics. So like I said, I have music in every single one of my workshops. So it doesn't matter whether I'm being paid or if I'm doing it for volunteer work with my outreach. I always have workshops that involve music.
It's so
every
therapeutic,
time.
isn't it? It really
Yeah.
is.
So,
So, talking about emotions, just very quickly, when I was teaching young kids, um, when I was running workshops and I'd pick emotions out of bags, right? When you've got a group of young children and you've given them emotions, I I didn't forget after a couple of years, but it's interesting that oftentimes some of these young people don't know what these emotions are because they've never felt them. And trying it when you see it, you're like, oh, of course, you're too young to have felt that emotion. Some young people don't have the
hmm,
life experience to have felt some of these emotions. And it used to just
ah,
completely throw me when we were doing these emotions workshops. But yeah, I
uh-huh.
just thought about that when you were talking about it.
That's interesting though, to give someone emotions is interesting. I
Yeah.
usually like, yeah. I mean, that's kind of there is one where I choose the emotion for them, but usually it's like the whole class, and I rarely will choose it myself. I like the whole class to choose it. And then there's sometimes they really like to challenge me and they say, do all of them. So I have a line and then they tell me to do all of the emotions that are up on the board.
Yeah.
And then that's when my acting skills really have to come in. It's fun though.
um, and you've worked with LGBTQIA2S groups as well, is that
Hmm.
right? So
Yes.
I think the first thing is until I saw 2S, I'd never heard of 2S before.
Uh-huh.
So what is 2S? I looked it up earlier and
Uh-huh.
I can't remember what it is now. It's
Two spirit.
two spirit, and this covers individuals who identify as the opposite sex. Um, so it covers um, well, what I saw online was 2S was designed in 1990 to cover what is now known as non-binary and kind of non-identifiable. Is that right? What is 2S? Just
So 2S, two spirit is actually for Indigenous people,
okay,
and that's why I use it.
okay,
For in the LGBTQIA2S plus,
okay.
yeah, is because it's recognizing the Native Americans in the
Got it.
US.
Okay,
So a lot of Native Americans who identified as more than one gender, I guess you could say, would be trans, or sometimes it varies with two spirit is, and it's not necessarily in every single indigenous culture either. It's only in some of the cultures, but I'm still recognizing it so that way people who will feel comfortable if they are indigenous or Native American in my groups. Um, I think like there a long time ago, some people would see themselves as being female, right? So they would take on more female characteristics because there was more than one gender. It wasn't just male or female. So then they would be actually very respected and honored in the Native American tribe because that they were in. And the reason is because they were able to understand both the male and female perspectives. And so this was like this is basically a third gender.
okay.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so this is why they were very revered, because it's and they also commonly were seen as like basically having like these other spiritual outlooks in life and more connected to their God because they were able to understand both male and female perspectives. And so, like it's hard to know how a man feels, right? If you're a
Yeah.
woman, and hard to understand how a woman feels if you're a man.
Well, unless I'm in
So
drag, then I've got it. I've nailed it.
exactly, that's the point. It's like, hey, if he knows or she knows or they know how it feels to be both, then
Yeah,
this is why it's so respected.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that. But that leads me to like I've not been in like involved with the community for a number of years now. I just completely came out of it for one reason or another. But what do you think are the key working with these young people? What would you say has changed over the years in the LGBTQIA plus 2S community?
Meaning for the youth? You're
Well,
saying what has changed for the youth or just overall
I
in the
just think
LGBTQ
overall, like, because
community?
young people will have completely different perspective of that community than I ever would have had.
Hmm.
Like, because when I was in the community, it was the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and that
Mm,
it's not a thing anymore because it's medicated. Like, it's not observed in the exact same way. So,
right.
because I'm not involved in the community, I just really wonder what perception, how is the perception so different these days than it would have been for me? Because I don't know the answer.
Hmm.
I don't know if you'd know the answer, but
Well, okay, so like I still work a lot with youth all the time. Like even as an educator, like as a substitute teacher, I see a lot of LGBTQ youth
so I
on a
mean, like,
regular
what if
basis.
I ask what's their main focus as part of that community? Because that will tell me exactly how it's different.
So more of my experience is with the youth and then it is with the older LGBTQ people, but I would say that there's a lot of focus on gender and not really caring about gender. There's a lot more of openness about who they are. And not, I think really what it is kind of like how LGBTQ, or how about straight people? I'll say straight people want to observe it gender as male female, right? Whereas I'm talking about it being a colonial construct, right? Because it's a
Hmm.
colonial construct. It's not actually real. I mean, it's just like race.
Yeah,
Race isn't real. I mean, no. Really, really all it is our skin color and our bone structure. Come on.
yeah,
Because we lived in different areas. So your bones look different than my bones because we had to adapt to where we're living. That's it. My skin looks very similar to the complexion to yours. Um, but if I were in the sun a lot, I'd probably get a lot darker because the sun beats down on me more over here than it does over in Europe, right? I'm lighter even when I go to Europe. Like I get even more pale.
it's all the
So
rain.
it is. It's the rain. So all that is the pigmentation is our bodies adapt, and so we have more pigmentation in some areas than for where we're living, and our eyelids change for the winds. It's just all adapting, and it has nothing to do with race. That's made up. We just made that up so that way someone can feel more superior to another being. That's it. And same for gender. Gender is like, that's not really real either. Like, did you know that high heels were used by men first in Europe? Like now women wear them. The color pink used to be the boys' color.
Yeah.
Okay, blue was the girls' color. And then one day, I don't even remember which store, I think it was Macy's or something, decided that they wanted girls to start wearing more pink because less girls were buying pink. So they put out a bunch of commercials showing like show off your brand new baby girl, and they had them in pink. And now suddenly pink, which used to be a man's color, is now a female color. Certain makeups were also worn by men too. Okay, and now men don't wear makeup unless of course you're LGBTQ, which is kind of cool. Like honestly, you're like blurring the lines, and all it
Yeah,
is they're
yeah.
saying, hey, why can't I have this too?
Hmm.
And that's all that's really happening. So you see that happening a lot LGBTQIA2S communities with the youth, because they're like doing their hair all pink, and I'm cool to them because I got the I got the
I've
bright
hardly
red
got
or
any.
hot pink. Yeah, this is watermelon color actually for my hair, and it's growing out. And I was like, oh, I don't know, I probably got a diamond rose. They're like, no, it looks cool, keep it that way. So I'm like, all right, whatever you guys say, um, and I don't really like care about gender. And so to me, and I have heard also there is one where it's it, and I'm like, okay, like I felt uncomfortable with that one,
Oh,
calling
really?
a student it. Yeah, and it was just because I didn't want to see them as an object, but it was because they didn't want to see themselves as any kind of like gender, so they used it instead. And I was like, well, I do understand, so I respected it. Like, if that's what they want, is for me to use the pronoun it, I used it. But as far as like that goes, I mean, yeah, sure, there are things that are going to make us uncomfortable because
I,
we don't understand it.
yeah. I knew
Yeah.
I taught a girl once who used to refer to herself in the third person.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes, I know people like that too.
because
Yes.
she was, I would say at the time, I mean, she was younger than 10. I can't remember how old she was, but she disconnected from herself at that period of her childhood, and you could
Mm,
just see it. And she would always refer to herself as the third person, as she's doing this,
mm-hmm,
she's going for a drink. And to start with, it baffled me, but when you
mm-hmm,
come around to that's your that's how you identify the moment. You identify with yourself differently because of
mm-hmm,
whatever is going on with you at the moment.
mm-hmm.
But it's talking about construct, society construct, the world construct. It's weird because I said to my partner this morning, we were walking to work, and we went to the shop to buy something, it's biscuits or whatever it was. And I said, do you ever wonder if you're buying that because you want it or because something's made you buy it? Because the way the world is, we're being manipulated every minute of
All
every
the
day.
time.
And I'm so aware
Mm-hmm.
of it. It messes me up sometimes. I cannot shake it.
Yeah.
I hate it. We're
No, I
all being
totally understand.
manipulated.
Yeah, I've had those conversations with guests too on my show, as a matter of fact. I purposefully, when I see other people liking something a lot, and I'm like, why?
Mm,
Like, why does everyone suddenly want this? It makes me not want it
yeah.
because
Like something's
I have
going
to be
on.
rebellious. Because I have to be rebellious, and like there are some shows like cartoons that like everyone's singing the
Yeah.
song and they're in the military or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not watching that show ever. Don't expect me. I don't know. I don't want to get
Yeah.
brainwashed. Like I have no idea. It kind of like trips me out. And I think maybe like that fear might be just a little maybe overboard response, but at the same time, you kind of got to wonder, like, why does everybody want to say and do these same exact
Yeah.
things, and why do we all want to eat that one hamburger,
Yeah.
like, or wear that one jacket, or like those pair of shoes or something?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
And
Yeah,
why is
I
there a
totally understand.
specific time of day where you get the same craving? It's not biological. It's all mentally. You're being mentally programmed. I
Yeah.
hate it. But in Europe, just recently, people have started wearing white mesh masks so that um, social CCTV can't recognize them to sell to them.
Oh.
Um, which I think is very
Huh.
clever. I might buy one, but I'll wait and see. Yeah, but talking about that, just to finish up, then, what is your mindfulness practice to keep yourself sane with all of this society-inducing stress that we have?
Oh, so one of the things that I do teach the kids, again, we're going back to the emotions, right? Is to recognize when I feel fear and why I feel fear. Sometimes you don't always have to know why
Yeah,
either. sometimes like it's okay for you to just feel afraid and not really connect to every reason why. And I used to need to know why, like, but let me get to the root of it. No, because sometimes your body is the only thing that's telling you, but you don't understand. And maybe it is from your childhood, maybe it's not from your childhood, but you don't necessarily need to dig down deep as to know why. If you really like observe it, like the feeling that you're having inside of your body and you're kind of confused by it, and then it suddenly tells you, oh, I'm afraid. So then you accept that you're afraid, and then next thing you know, you're crying because you not only are just afraid, but you're heartbroken or you're sad by what society is doing to the rest of the world and to you, right? And sometimes it's not sad. Sometimes it's anger. And I used to be really afraid of being angry because I didn't want to hurt anybody with my anger. And I had to, it was like, it wasn't even sadness. I would get sad from being angry, and I would also have anxiety from being angry because I needed to control that anger so much. But I realized just because I feel angry doesn't mean I'm going to go out and like punch somebody, right? It's okay for me to be angry. It's like, oh, I'm pissed off. I am pissed off by the situation because all my rights are being taken away and I have no agency over my own body anymore. I'm allowed to be really freaking angry if I want to. This is my body. No one gets to tell me what to do with it. And so, yeah, I'm allowed to feel rage even for that. And I used to think, okay, well, maybe I need to be very productive with this rage and go out into the world and save it, right? But no, I don't. I can actually just be angry. I can just feel the rage. It's all right. And then I still oftentimes still want to do something for the rest of the society because I've already tapped into my feelings. And I'm like, you know what? It's okay that I feel angry. And with this current situation, I decided that I am going to allow myself to not just be angry. I already felt all those feelings when I saw who was running. I saw my two choices. One was like for the death of a whole community and society of one type of people, and the other was like, you're all gonna die because you're all people of color, right? So I'm just like, wow, I don't really have a really good choice here. And so for me, I decided that instead of dwelling on that, and I had just allowed myself to feel those feelings, then I would join the Peace Corps because that's something that I've always dreamed of doing anyway. And so that actually gives me hope. And I understand that maybe I may not get there because I'm a person of color, but maybe I will, and maybe I'll be able to leave. But in the meantime, I'm still living life. I'm still making art. I'm still doing all the best things that I possibly can until I can't anymore.
Yeah.
And that's all I can really do. I have no control over anything else except for my own experience. And so it's okay for me to feel sad and angry and all those other things.
It is. And those feelings are a lot of the time what prompts creativity and expression. And I love to feel everything and be aware that I'm feeling everything because I know something good will come from it.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to finish up then, what are all your places? Where can we go to find out all your stuff, listen to your radio show, and see all these images of your performance art that you were telling us about?
So byginaduran.org is like, will connect you to basically every single thing, right? Or you can go, I just recently changed my tag name for Instagram to by Gina Rae Duran, because I decided I'm just going to start recognizing my whole name. Uh, and I know, like, I'm already published artist and author and everything with Gina Duran, but there's so many Gina Durans in the world.
Okay.
I decided, I'm going to use my middle name too. You'll still be able to find me as Gina Duran and Gina Rae Duran. So, not hard. Just add the Rae.
Rae was in a little box somewhere screaming to get out.
Exactly. And also my godmother named me Rae because she said I was a ray of light. So
which you are.
But it's R-A-E, not R-A-Y. It's R-A-E. But still, she's my mom was like, "Oh, it's the girl version." Okay, sure. Same difference, whatever. But yeah, she said it was a ray of light. So I was like, you know what? I am going to recognize that part of myself because right now I really need that light. So by Gina Rae Duran on Instagram. You can find me on the collective_KQBH, which is the KQBH is for the radio show, kqbhla.com. And you can find me on, let me see, the IE Hope Collective, also on Instagram. So all three of those.
Excellent. Guys, I will put all the links in the show notes if you want to pop along and see them. And keep us posted on your book as well when you graduate.
Thank you. Yes.
Because that will be amazing.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to find me on Facebook also, just Gina Rae Duran. So thank you so much for having me on.
No worries at all. And thank you again for joining all of us. It's been fantastic to talk to you. And it would actually be really great to catch up in the future and hear more about your progress and everything that you've been doing. And hear more about the Peace Corps when you get in. There's no ifs there. Yeah. You will get in, I'm sure of it.
I will. I will.
And thank you guys for listening and being part of our discussion today. We love you, and we hope you get some great takeaways from this episode. So until next time, look after yourselves and keep on growing. Positivity and wellness awaits. Take care. Bye-bye.